but I'll be meeting very shortly with President Putin. President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now,
This one, just the fact that it's been taking place in Alaska, which is very unusual, just shows the abnormality of the situation, right? It's something that we have not seen before. You know, summits have taken place before between, let's say, the Soviet Union, Moscow, or the United States, places like Reykjavik, for example. Or last time, of course, Trump and Putin met, that was in Helsinki. But things have changed. Things have moved on. So from Russia's perspective, they don't like the Europeans. And I think having a summit somewhere far away from Europe, excluding Europe, is a way for Putin to say, look, Europe doesn't matter. We have our own relationship with the United States. We're actually neighbors. And, you know, take it or leave it. We'll just talk about our things, which, by the way, includes Ukraine, and you're not included here. And so that's a message to the Europeans more than anything else. Now, and you almost have to wonder, is in the one-on-one that President Trump and President Putin are going to have, if Putin is going to go into one of his lengthy historical lessons, as he likes to do, and talk about how, you know, Alaska used to belong to Russia and was unfairly taken away from it, or something like that. You know, I don't know. Maybe he won't, but I think the symbolism that this was once upon a time a part of Russia and now is not is there one way or another. So I think there is something significant about Alaska specifically. And all of us have to ask, well, what is going to be the outcome of this? And the person who has to ask the most is, of course, President Zelensky, who is already sounding alarm bells in his commentary, saying, look, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. We're not going to necessarily accept anything you decide about us. So he's clearly worried.
Президент Трамп оголосив про підготовку своєї зустрічі з Путіним на Алясці. Дуже далеко від цієї війни, яка триває на нашій землі, проти нашого народу, яку все одно не закінчити без нас, без України.
Yes, it's unlikely that Ukraine right now will regain its borders up to, borders of 1991. It's just plain unrealistic at this point. However, preserving Ukraine's independence, that's a key issue, and I don't think, Ukrainians will not be willing to negotiate this particular item. I think that's a very important one.
Уважаемые коллеги, мы обсудим сегодня некоторые вопросы региональной повестки дня, региональной политики.
Russia desires nothing as much as a recognition of its greatness by the United States. You know, the United States is the main recognizer. They can give that to Russia. This sort of legitimacy that comes from being seen, being recognized, etc. So for Russia, this symbolic significance is massive, which is why you have to wonder why President Trump is giving that to Putin. That is something that Putin craves, absolutely craves. There's no question about it. What is he going to get in return for this? Is Putin going to agree to actually end the war in Ukraine? If so, on what kind of terms? And this is where some of the big questions start to come up, because, of course, we know that Putin has made his demands about the conditions that he would like fulfilled before he stops his war in Ukraine. And those conditions are not pretty conditions from the standpoint of Ukraine. You know, surrender of territory, interference with Ukraine's internal legislation, like changing Ukrainian laws, making sure that Ukraine is permanently neutral, not a part of NATO. Most importantly, and crucially actually for Ukraine, demilitarizing Ukraine, i.e. not allowing Ukraine to have a military to be able to defend itself. So lots of demands that he will likely present to President Trump in that summit. Will Trump agree to those? Those are the big questions that I think people are asking.
Nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
Well, it is very clear that President Trump wants to put an end to this for reasons of legacy. He wants to see himself as the peace president, and to give credit where credit is due. He's actually been quite successful in many ways. Just take a look at the very recent summit that we had between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which Trump basically sponsored. But for him, the big prize is putting in a war which he claims would not have started without him, and so on. And so for him, it's a question of legacy. He will be the one who will bring these two warring parties to a peace table, and everything will be solved. The problem, of course, is I think this conflict is much more complicated than any of the other ones, save for the Middle Eastern one, that he is having to deal with. Well, I think if nothing comes from it, that's also okay from Putin's perspective. It's going to be sort of humiliating for Trump if nothing comes out of this, because he will have given all that face to Putin, he will have given all that recognition to Putin, and then got nothing out of this. Well, that's a slap in the face. So that's not going to be looking good for Trump at all. For Putin, he will look great. He will say, look, I'm being wined and dined here in America. And of course, remember that 2 weeks later, so the summit is on August 15th, but then 2 weeks later, he's going to China because there's an SCO meeting there. There's a Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So you'll be meeting with Xi Jinping, having already done his rounds with President Trump, and that puts him in a better position. So he stands to win no matter what happens.
It's great to be with you.
I mean, it's an incentive, clearly, and Russia wants to have a reasonable relationship with the United States for all kinds of reasons, economic reasons. I mean, remember that Putin wants sanctions lifted, and the United States, if it lifted sanctions on Russia, that would be a major thing, because it will be so much more difficult than to sustain the European sanctions regime without the Americans buying into this, right? So.
APT. First, a question for Mr. Trump in English.
People came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia.
On the other side, you have questions of legacy. Putin is getting on years, right? He's not going to stay around forever. And I think even his invasion of Ukraine was largely motivated by this question of legacy. Am I the Tsar who gathered the Russian land, so to speak? That's how the internal narrative goes. And 100 years from now, will they look back on this and say, well, Putin is the one who gathered the lands, or will they say, well, he was just having a good relationship with President Trump? So in other words, it's this question of legacy and the question of Ukraine specifically, and how important it is to Russia's national identity, that I think has to be put on the other side of the equation, and that's what makes this dynamic kind of complicated.
I think my instinct really tells me that we have a shot at it, okay? And
that's right, and he's made his admiration for Putin quite clear on numerous occasions, his admiration for Russia quite clear on numerous occasions as well. And of course, there's a particular school of thought within the Trump administration, though it's not 100% clear whether Trump actually has signed up to this, and this is to kind of use Russia as a counterweight against China, which is a strategy that is unlikely to work in my view. But nevertheless, they're pursuing this particular strategy as well, I think.
thank you.